this it? Good evening, everybody. And thank you very much for that warm reception. Now, let me surprise you a little bit by asking for a bit of audience participation. Who thinks Tony Blair's a good chap? Well, this is obviously not going to get off to a very good start. Because I think Tony Blair today has done us an enormous favour. That was the Europhile fanatic, the man that wanted Britain to join the Euro, the man that promised us a referendum on the EU constitution and didn't deliver, the man that has made tens of millions on the back of the big corporates that support the Brussels machine. All right, okay, so far, you know, I'm not sounding like much of a fan, I know that. But Tony Blair today has done something we haven't seen for several general elections. He has decided to make Britain's membership of the European Union a debating point in this election campaign, and for that, I thank him from the bottom of my heart. Because all the rest of them want to brush it under the carpet. I mean, Mr. Clegg's position. And by the way, I have to say that last year, Nick Clegg challenging me to 2-hour-long debates on national television. Nobody has done more for my political career than Nick Clegg. And of course, Mr. Miliband, who represents a political party that used to stand up for ordinary working men and women in this country, used his first speech of this election campaign to big up the giant multinational corporates who've done so much to depress the wages of workers, and he who will not even consider giving the people a referendum on who governs Britain. And Mr. Cameron, who spent, oh, by the way, do you remember back to 2008, Mr. Cameron, or Dave, as he likes to be known, just to show that he's got the common touch. No, Dave said, I give you this cast iron guarantee that if I become Prime Minister, there'll be a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty. Well, he became Prime Minister, and what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And he spent 2011 and 2012 telling us there would not be a referendum on our membership of the European Union. In fact, 5 times in 2012, he said it would be against our national interest to have a referendum. Well, he's now been forced, I suspect with the rise of UKIP, into at least promising a referendum, but I thought Tony Blair today got him right when he said that it was a strange thing, given that Mr. Cameron wants to remain a member of the European Union, even on current terms. And what Blair has done today, quite beautifully, what Blair has done today, even better than I could possibly have attempted to do in the so-called leaders' debate last week, is Blair has made it clear that in this election there is a simple choice. It is between the political establishment of Britain, who believe that it's right that we're members of a political union, who are prepared to accept that 75% of our laws are made somewhere else, who believe that a daily membership fee of £55 million a day is acceptable, and who accept, as a consequence of all of this, that we have a complete open border to 485 million people. They're all over here. And over here, there's UKIP, who says we should govern our own country, control our own borders, and be proud of who we are as a people. you, Mr. Blair, for making it perfectly clear there are only two parties in this election, UKIP and the amorphous mass. And I'm enormously grateful to him. And I'm quite prepared. I mean, I can't obviously quite afford, and UKIP can't quite afford his normal appearance fee. But if he wants to do a public debate with me in any town hall in the country, I'll take him on every single night between now and the next election. And I say that to you not because I stand here as somebody who is against Europe. To be against Europe would be a moronic position to take. And I say that as somebody, of course, who is married to a girl who was born and raised in Hamburg. So I understand the complexities of this. Indeed, nobody understands more than me the dangers of living in a German-dominated household. But it isn't just UKIP. It isn't just the Brits that are Eurosceptic. Now you see right across Europe, from north to south to east to west, people from the right of politics, from the centre of politics, from the left of politics, saying actually, in terms of the big message, many of the same things that we in UKIP are saying. And what we're saying is this model does not work. This Europe is not one that any of us ever voted for. And what we want actually is a Europe of independent sovereign nation states that trade together, that cooperate together, that are happy to be next door neighbours with each other, but one in which we get rid of the European Commission, Mr. Juncker, and maybe we even cut back a little bit on the pension of Neil Kinnock and one or two others. Let's hope we can debate this as an election issue. I certainly hope and believe that we should. And there's another issue that has not been discussed at all in this election, and it's one that UKIP have raised today here in the heart of the country, in the West Midlands, that nobody else really wants to talk about, and that is the issue of defence. It's a very important issue. We're told there are no votes in defence, no one cares about defence, so it doesn't matter that we've slashed the British Army back in the course of this 5 years from 80 to 100,000. And they genuinely believe in Westminster that not keeping up with a NATO commitment of 2% doesn't matter. Well, I've got a message for our political class in Westminster. They are wrong about this, as they're wrong about virtually everything else. The first duty of any government is to defend the realm, and we as a nation care about defence, and we care even more about the men and women that have served this country in conflict and been treated so badly since they've come back. So we'll do our best over the next 30 days to get these issues discussed. But perhaps in the end, the campaign will come down to more than just policy. You see, this is the first ever fixed-term parliament we've had in this country. And it's noticeable that on January the 2nd, the first day of the first working day of the new year, both the parties came out firing their artillery shells at each other. We're in the middle now of the longest general election campaign this party has ever seen. And every single morning, when you turn on your radio or you turn on your television, you see a new promise, a new pledge, several hundred million for this or for that, another interest group being lobbied and being told to vote Labour or vote Conservative is to guarantee life in the sunlit uplands. And I've got a feeling that actually all of these promises are now going in one ear and coming out of the other. I'm not sure any of us believe these promises, but what we're also seeing in conjunction with that is, I think, the most negative, the most nasty, and the most personal election campaign we've ever seen in this country. You know, I'm no great fan of Ed Miliband's politics, but I think some of the daily assaults on him, and the way that he looks, and the way that he speaks, by the newspapers and by other elements of the media, frankly, I think they're deeply unpleasant, and I think politics needs to be a little bit more than just tearing strips off the personality of the other side. I really do. And the same happens from another wing of the press on David Cameron every single day. You know, criticising him for his background, for his privilege, and for his remarkable head of dark hair. Although I suppose any man that can reverse the greying process deserves great respect. And of course, on a daily basis, they all attack me and they all attack UKIP. Well, let them do it. But our job as a party, we've got to rise above this. We've got to rise above the negative and the nasty and the personal. And anybody in this room, I'm sure, will agree with me that when Mr. Cameron said in a big newspaper interview this morning that people should come home from UKIP, they should come back to the Conservative Party, he totally misunderstood what UKIP is. You know, we're not all retired half-colonels living on the edge of Salisbury Plain. In fact, a minority, I'm sure there's a half-colonel here somewhere, but because there always is. But the point is, actually, a minority of UKIP support voted Conservative in 2010. UKIP picks up support from Conservatives, disappointed, of course, at the expansion of wind farms on England's green and pleasant land and on our seascapes. It picks up support from Conservatives, disappointed that despite this coalition's pledge to you at this election, that they're the people to back because the economy is in sound shape, actually they've doubled the national debt in the space of 5 years. You know, our voters aren't just former Tories, and they're not going back to Mr. Cameron because many of them come from old Labour. Many of our voters come from patriotic old Labour who simply can't believe that we now have a Labour Party that has literally turned its back on working men and women in this country. Because the truth is that uncontrolled mass immigration of unskilled and semi-skilled labour has had one undeniable effect upon families in this country. It has driven down their wages. And the minimum wage, which Labour brought in, and the idea was it would be a base to give working people some sort of income, has now in fact become a glass aspiration on their ceilings. The minimum wage for 1.5 million British workers has now become the maximum wage because we've opened up our doors to 10 former communist countries and southern Europe. And while the big corporates have benefited, and while some of the big landowners have benefited from cheap labour, the living standards of ordinary, decent British families has declined, and the Labour Party don't care anymore. So a large lump of the Labour vote comes from, of the UKIP vote, sorry, comes from the Labour Party. And we also pick up some votes from the Liberal Democrats, believe it or not, who I think were voting Liberal Democrat on the basis of a plague on both your houses. That may be the one element of the UKIP vote that perhaps is a protest vote. But there's something else, folks, going on that is very much more interesting, that I don't yet think the commentators or the opinion polls have really understood, and it's this. And we saw it in Clacton, and we saw it in Hayward and Middleton, And we saw it in the by-election in Rochester and Stroud. And what we saw were people coming up to us and saying, I didn't vote in 2010, or I haven't voted for 20 years, or I'm a first-time young voter, or indeed, I'm 70 years old and I've never voted in my life. But I'm voting UKIP because I believe you are offering this country hope for the future. And we should be very proud of that. Now, we're still left with this idea that is pushed out on a daily basis by elements of the media, and indeed form part of David Cameron's conference speech last September. And it's this: David Cameron painted a vision, and for many people, it's a rather horrific one. He said, if you go to bed with Nigel Farage, well, at least there's some support in the room. He said, come on, this is serious business. He said, if you go to bed with Nigel Farage, you'll wake up with Ed Miliband. Now that is pretty worrying, isn't it? And it's exactly the same line that he pumped out overnight about coming home from UKIP to the Conservatives. It is the complete misunderstanding of who the UKIP voters really are. Look, in Rochester and Stroud, where, following on from what Douglas Carswell did, Mark Reckless, having spent 10 years of his life trying to win that seat, within 4.5 years resigned his seat and joined UKIP and stood in a by-election on the basis, as he said, and as Carswell had said before him, that ultimately it was the people that are the real bosses. What a fine and principled thing that was to do. Now, after a by-election at which the Conservative Party said it would throw the kitchen sink, and indeed a by-election that had no fewer than 5 prime ministerial visits, despite all of that, Mark Reckless won that by-election, thank goodness. But what was interesting was this: the UKIP share of the vote in Rochester went from 0 in 2010 to 42%, all right? The Conservative vote declined by 14%, 14%, and therefore 28% of the vote in Rochester was made up of people who had not voted Conservative in 2010. So by a multiple, actually, of 2 to 1, the people that re-elected Mark Reckless as the MP for Rochester and Stroud had not been Conservative voters. But that was even starker with what happened in that by-election on the 9th of September in Haywood and Middleton. A safe Labour seat. A seat in which, on the Sunday before the Thursday election, the Labour Party had a lead of 20%, according to the polls. And yet UKIP came within 617 votes of winning that by-election. I suspect, had we got another 618 votes, that Ed Miliband would no longer be leader of the Labour Party. And for that, I'm very grateful that we didn't win the by-election. But the real reason we didn't win the by-election was because too many people still went out and voted Conservative, even though their candidate was languishing in a poor 3rd place. And the point was, actually, in Haywood and Middleton, if you went to bed with David Cameron, you woke up with Ed Miliband. And so the argument, frankly, is all to pot, isn't it? It really is. Now, I'm here tonight following on from those by-election 2 successes and 1 very close success to say this to you. Don't listen to those who say to you, if you vote Conservative, you'll let Labour in. Don't listen to those who say to you that the converse is true. Don't listen to those talking about how the UKIP vote will split the other vote and let somebody else in. That is all negative stuff. What we prove in Rochester, what we prove in Clacton, is that in our key target seats, if you vote UKIP, you will get UKIP. And that is why it is a pleasure to be here tonight to support our campaign in Dudley, both in Dudley North and in Dudley South. One a Labour-held constituency and one a Conservative-held constituency. This part of England has seen the heart of England, this part of England has seen a massive growth in the support of UKIP over the last few years. We're winning council seats. We're building up party membership. We've got serious candidates who are there in contention. And we've got a fighting chance. Because we can draw support from the left and from the right and from those that don't vote for anybody, we've got a serious fighting chance of taking these seats. And that, gentlemen, is why I'm here tonight to support your campaign and to urge the people of Dudley, or is it Dudley? I don't know, I can't quite. To urge you to support our candidates to make this really happen. And I'll tell you something else about these candidates, about UKIP candidates, and perhaps a little bit about myself. One of the things that I believe has gone fundamentally wrong in British politics is that the front benches of our three established parties are now staffed by people who come from backgrounds and life experiences that are just too similar. So many of them go to the same handful of schools. So many of them go to the same university. So many of them do the same degree. So many of them, after that degree, go and work as researchers. So many of them become members of Parliament in their late 20s. And ladies and gentlemen, my view is this country is increasingly being run by a bunch of college kids who've got no experience of life and don't understand how life is out there for ordinary people. I urged people last year to join the UKIP People's Army, an army that would take on the establishment of this country. I don't say this because I'm some kind of revolutionary, I'm not. I say this as somebody who was a businessman for 20 years, who worked in the metal trading industry. I say this as somebody who has got into politics because I believe something fundamentally has gone wrong. What they have done is they've given away our country. What they have done is they've given away our birthright. What they have done is given away control of our borders. And I want to take all of it back. I want us. I want us to be a self-governing, proud nation that stands on her own 2 feet, makes her own decisions, is responsible for her own laws, and reaches out way beyond Europe to a bigger, more exciting world. Let's re-engage. Let's re-engage with the 2.2 billion people that live in the Commonwealth, speak our language, and understand. And let's turn the immigration debate from being something that has become a great negative in our country, and that's hardly surprising, given that net migration now runs 10 times higher than it did from Windrush until the late 1990s. Let's be the one party that can be positive about immigration, that can say, we will put in place an Australian-style point system so we can decide who comes to live and settle in our country. Let's be the party that actually credibly can talk about how this country can reduce the enormous scale of our annual deficit without affecting frontline services. And let's begin that by not paying out a net £10 billion a year to the EU. Let's add another £10 billion a year by cutting the foreign aid budget, which this government believe is their finest achievement. Let's do that. And let's get some reality on the health service. You might have noticed I came in for some criticism last week over one or two comments I made about the National Health Service and health tourism. But I'm not the sort of chap that easily gets frightened away. So let me repeat the point. How can it be right in a country that has a National Health Service that we can tell women in their 80s with breast cancer that we haven't got enough money to treat them, and yet anybody from anywhere in the world can jet into Heathrow, go to a London hospital, be tested for HIV and receive drugs worth £25,000 a year? How can that be right? And this is not about being mean-spirited, narrow-minded or nationalist. It's about basic common sense. You look after your family before you look after the family next door. And surely, if it is the duty of government to put defence of the realm first, it is the duty of government, secondly, to put the well-being of our own citizens first, and only UKIP in this election campaign is unashamedly patriotic and proud and will stand up and say, let's put this country first, let's put the great back into Britain. Thank you.